It's bad lighting.
It is.
Hi, everybody. How are you? See, two of you are following. Good to see you both. Happy Sunday to everyone out there, anyone who's watching, and everyone else who watches this later.
Mm-hmm.
It's March 21st, 22nd,
Yes.
March 22nd of 2020.
Sunday.
Sunday.
Day. Well, I guess it depends on where you are in terms of how long you've been in quarantine, or why can't I never remember the other term? The stay at
Social
home.
distancing.
No, there's a stay at home term.
Shelter at home.
Shelter in place. Yes, if you're sheltering in place,
Yeah.
then this might be appropriate for you. What we wanted to talk about a little bit today is the tension might be coming up for many people with the increased time at home during shelter in place, or if people are just listening to the advice of the experts and just staying home, even if it's not being mandated that you do so. And it's an interesting opportunity for us to turn in, and I think a lot of people are talking about that. There's a ton of great resources online that many of you are probably already connected with. But so out in the world, we are being asked um, to go into our homes, to sort of withdraw ourselves from the world and come within. And I think that's a pretty good metaphor for what we really can be doing within our own psyches, um, and within our interpersonal relationships, especially if you're married or have a significant other and you're used to having kind of a dependable amount of time away from each other. And all of a sudden you're sort of thrust into this situation of um, maybe not getting away from each other for times where you've depended on it. And so if there's tension coming up for people, by the way, for the couple people who have joined us already, please do ask questions. This is our first time doing a YouTube live, but it appears that you can speak to us. So if you've got questions, specific questions about your situation, or even general questions, go ahead and write those in the chat box there.
Or if you want to say hi.
Or if you want to say hi, that's okay too. So we're being called to come out of the exterior world into our homes. And in our relationships, I think that it's important to recognize that there's a really big opportunity for us to do the same thing. And that if we're not doing that, then we might be running into stress in our relationships. Okay. So Jamie and I, for the record, we are not relationship therapists per se, but we do see people in the clinic all the time working through their own stuff, and inevitably issues with relationships come up. And the advice that we give to them is, if you want to improve your relationship, you have to begin looking first and foremost at what's happening within yourself and your own psyche. That's the place to start. And so as we withdraw into our homes and stop engaging with the exterior world so much, then there's a kind of corresponding opportunity for us to stop projecting on one another in our relationships. And so maybe you haven't heard this term before, or maybe you have, but you don't really understand it. Projection is when we take our own sort of unconscious, unhealed stuff and sort of throw it out of ourselves onto the other person, right? And what are some sort of key languaging things that are consistent with that? Things like, you make me feel like. That would be a pretty classic example of a projecting statement, when you sort of blame your feelings on the other person. So I think that the most important thing in engaging in a healthy relationship, especially when you're sort of thrust into more time together than maybe you're used to experiencing, is that we withdraw the projection from one another. And that means that whatever I'm experiencing in my relationship with Jamie, I don't blame her for it. That I recognize that my feelings are my responsibility, and that whatever is going on in the relationship, however I'm triggered or whatever I want to sort of blame on her or project onto her, I actually withdraw that and take it and own responsibility for that. Anything else to say about projection?
Maybe we should talk about some of the other ways that happens,
Hmm.
because it's more than just you make me feel.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you?
Especially in like male female dynamics.
Yeah.
Or even in parent child dynamics. So, for instance, another way this shows up in couples, um, I'll give you a really personal example that hopefully will highlight it for you. When Noah and I first got together, I had not yet learned how to hold the masculine energy for myself. Um, so there were a lot of like man-like things I wanted him to do for me.
Right.
Like taking off my old license plate and putting on a new one.
Car stuff. Anything car stuff.
Anything with cars. Yeah, there was just a lot of ways that I was looking to him to be my father, because I hadn't developed my own inner strength, my own inner kind of structure and organization. Yeah, I just hadn't grown up in that way yet. And so projection can also mean sending out like a desired role onto someone else and wanting them to live up to that role. Men do that with women too. They have an expectation, perhaps, that their wife or their partner will be just like their mom was, and maybe do all of the cooking or all of the cleaning or most of those tasks or all of the child rearing. And that is also projection.
Yeah. And so I think, again, talking about this within the context of maybe a lot of us are at home spending more time with each other, and we don't have the opportunity to sort of externalize and avoid.
Yeah.
Right. Like
our triggers.
Right. Like a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with this, you have good relationships, and the sort of goodness and health of that relationship is predicated on, one of you going away to work for 10 hours a day.
Yeah, one or both of you.
Right. Or both of you.
Yeah.
Right. There's like, 3 or 4 hours a day we do great, but suddenly we're thrust together for, a week straight, and problems begin to arise. Right. So the question is, what do you do when those problems begin to arise? Well, again, if we talk about this in terms of withdrawing projection, it means that we don't blame the other person for what's going on, that we take ownership of our own life experience, our own feelings.
Yeah.
And begin to work with the material that shows up there. So, if I'm feeling frustrated or angry, or if Jamie does something that suddenly I find myself kind of triggered and wanting to project onto her as being the source of my discomfort, I just recognize that I'm doing that, and I withdraw that. I take it back, and I own the feelings as coming from within me. And so maybe it's worth saying that when we're talking about healthy relationship dynamics, we're not talking about a relationship that is on cruise control or that is always smooth and effortless and just blissful. That's not really, I think, a realistic sense of what a healthy relationship is. I think we have a very healthy relationship, and on a daily basis, there's something that comes up where one of us is being triggered, or there's tension.
Yeah.
I guess that's
There's
probably the
something
best
there.
way of saying it, is that a healthy relationship doesn't mean a tension-free relationship. I think the difference in a healthy relationship and what we are committed to practicing with each other is that when that tension arises, I don't blame her for it, and I don't expect her to make it better. And she doesn't blame me for it and expect me to make it better. And that's, to me, that's the starting point, right? So if you're having experiences of tension in your relationship, now that these relationships are much closer and without the sort of normal breaks that you would normally have throughout your life, then you would be well advised to each begin sort of owning your own feelings, and understanding this phenomenon of projection, and not blaming the other person or expecting the other person to make you feel a certain way. And again, a dead giveaway is if we ask the other person to make it better, right? I'm feeling this way and I need you to make it better for me somehow.
Right.
that's a recipe for disaster.
Let's think of some practical examples
Okay. Well, and maybe if some others have some practical examples
or
as well
questions.
as questions
Yeah.
about how this works. But I think the sort of long-winded point that I'm trying to make here is that to me, this is a starting place, right? This is something that we can sort of get around when we can get out in the world and go out on a Friday night, or we're gone for 12 hours at a time. Um, and we have these opportunities to sort of avoid these triggers or just shrug them off or not deal with them. And
Mhm.
um, we're limited in our opportunities to do that. Again, we're being called to sort of come within and take ownership here. So some other examples.
Well, I'm thinking of what people might be triggered by right now.
Mhm,
Like money is a big trigger for a lot of people right now.
right.
And so how might that show up in a relationship?
Yeah. Um, boy, that's a complicated one.
I mean, I'll give you an example.
Yeah. Right.
So this week we have had much less of a caseload in
Mhm,
our clinic. We're
mhm,
seeing most people online. And we're looking forward to the next few weeks and wondering how many are we going to see? How many people are gonna be able to be
mhm,
seen? And oh, I see Megan. Hi, Maggie.
mhm,
Maggie, we'll get back to your question in a second. Um, so, as Noah and I were talking about all of the stress about finances and are we going to try to apply for a disaster loan and what are we going to do financially? I recognized that um, your energy as you were talking about it,
mhm.
I couldn't
Yeah.
communicate to you. I had to say, my there's too much emotional charge right now for
Mhm,
me to be logical or rational about this topic.
right.
Um,
Which is you owning your projection.
yeah.
And my side of that conversation was owning my projection and my frustration.
Mhm.
I wanted to sort of talk through the logistics of what we would do financially in various scenarios, and she wasn't having
I couldn't
it.
do it.
She wanted no part of it, right? And so here's another way to withdraw the projection is to make sure you're not taking things personally. And this is a huge ask, and it's a big deal if you're not used to this, but again, it's a really kind of fundamental part of being in a healthy relationship to not take things personally. And that might sound strange because this is personal, right? We're in a personal relationship, two people in a relationship together. But if she's frustrated, angry, and wants no part of what I'm saying, I can hear that and sort of honor that that's where she is without taking that personally and getting offended.
Mhm.
And so we each have sort of our part in that financial discussion where she communicates to me, I'm triggered by the money talk and I can't even hear the logic of what you're saying. I can't process it right now.
Yeah.
And then I have to own my frustration and go, okay,
Yeah. I couldn't even tell you were frustrated. Good
yeah,
job.
great. It's working.
I had no idea.
I was frustrated.
Oh,
Yes, because I wanted to talk about money and you couldn't. But
yeah.
again, instead of, a common response would have been for me to say, well, this is really important and I don't think you're giving it the importance that it's
Yeah.
due and we need to talk about this now.
Mhm.
And all of that's just me throwing up my frustration,
Yeah.
and my own kind of fears around financial stuff in this time coming up. That would
Mhm.
have been me projecting it all over her. Um, and that's just a downward spiral, especially at a time
Yeah.
like this. So we withdrew that, and I just accepted that she wasn't in a place to talk about it, and I owned that my reasons for my being frustrated were mine to deal with, and I didn't ask her to fix it for me. Um,
I think that's important. Just at any time of the year, in any stressful situation, it's helpful to recognize when your partner or whoever you're in the relationship with is not capable of having a rational,
mhm,
rational, peaceful, helpful,
yeah,
useful conversation. When people get physically flooded, their heart rate is increased, they feel scattered or not present. You're not going to get very much out of that conversation. For me, I was in fear, And when I'm feeling fear, all I can express is the fear.
Mhm.
And that has its place. And I could have gone to you and said, "Can I just have a hug for a minute? And then we can talk about it."
Yeah.
But it would probably, and it did take me about 10 minutes of some breathing and some relaxation in order to get into a place where we could converse about it again.
Mhm.
Um,
So Megan is asking,
Yeah.
she says, blame is a good one. I'm always surprised when my partner says I'm blaming him. What is a gentle way to get him to be aware of this? I've tried a few things, etc.
There's a couple layers to this,
Yeah.
because for me, this is what pops out for me right away, and then you can maybe finish the rest of it. We may use perfect language. We may use non-accusatory language. For instance, you may be saying, not, "You're making me feel pissed off right now." You might be saying, "I'm feeling really angry right now because you did this action." And it could be like an appropriate statement. However, the energy could be actually physically coming out of you and being projected at that person. And they feel that directive anger, that
Mhm.
directive blame, no matter what you're saying. So, step one is kind of like, notice what your energy is doing. Notice if you are actually
Mhm.
blaming him with your energy, if not with your words.
Mhm.
So, that's one thing just to be aware of.
Right. It's sort of like the kind of cliche. We're buffering. We appear to be buffering. The cliche sort of,
Yeah.
or I'm not angry, or I'm not yelling,
Yes.
I'm not raising my voice with a raised voice tone, right? So we do have to pay attention to our energy. But as Jamie was also, the language is really important. Is there anything in the language that is suggesting that the feelings that a person's fault or responsibility?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing to check.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, but at the same time, we can honor what the other person is experiencing, and so if this was something between she and I, take it personally that feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My intention is not to blame you.
Yeah.
Let me check my energy. Am I actually okay, maybe, yeah, maybe I'm saying I don't blame you, but
Yeah.
and sort of pull that back and just restate what I'm feeling. And speaking in first person is always a safe bet, right? I am angry, or I am upset, or I feel upset. Fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want the other person to fix it, then we are still projecting a little bit.
And sometimes it's helpful. I'm sure we've said this to each other, where we will actually say, "I don't hold you responsible for this. I don't need you to fix this."
Mhm.
But
If you sort of know that you are not doing any blaming and you have no intention or energy of that, but your partner is still perceiving that, all you can really do is show up and say, listen, I have no blame of you for this, and you're just going to kind of have to take my word for it. And if that person's still to watch this video, or, there's a million resources out there about how to do this. But it really does take both people being committed to sort of operating within the truth of relationship dynamics, literally blame me for them
Mhm.
and say, you did this, and this, and now I feel this way. I still wouldn't feel blamed,
Mhm.
even if she was literally blaming me, because I'm committed to understanding relationship dynamics, and I can sort of step back and just see that she's triggered, and be okay with that,
Yeah.
and just sort of know there's nothing I can do here. And we've had, I think, in the, however long 5 years or whatever we've been together,
Mhm.
we've had probably one or two of those where each one of us has had to sort of step back and
Yeah.
say, internally, well, this one's off the rails. And there's only one of us here owning the projection, and nothing is really going to be accomplished. And I think we've all been in these really frustrating situations, arguments, discussions, whatever, that just feels like it's this intense, energetic, like,
Going nowhere.
game of tennis, except instead of a tennis ball, it's a hand grenade and you're just waiting for it to blow up. And you're missing each other's point,
Yeah.
and nobody's getting the other when the energy is like that, it's a dead giveaway that you're just projecting all over each other. And
Mhm.
it takes at least one person to sort of step out of that energetic dynamic and own their part of it and say, okay, I need to go kind of be with my feelings here. So
And if you've already tried several gentle ways to help him be aware of the fact that you aren't actually blaming him, then you may be stuck.
yeah,
That's an area of growth for him
right.
that he'll get to.
But if you really want to get serious, how do you feel about being accused of blaming?
Yeah.
And if that makes you continually upset, then that's actually your piece
To heal.
to heal and look at,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if you're not doing any blame about that,
Mm-hmm.
then the anger is your part to own.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And to be honest, if I had to be really well, I'm going to be really honest,
yes, you
because
should be.
why the fuck not? 9 times out of 10, when I think I'm not blaming you, I'm always blaming you.
Yeah.
So if it occurs to me to think I'm not blaming him, I'm most definitely blaming him.
Yeah. And again, this comes back to a healthy relationship doesn't mean this stuff doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
It means that you understand and are working with the sort of deeper truth and the mechanisms of a relationship. And I will tell you that I, at an ego level, do the same thing. There's all kinds of, like, anytime something goes missing, my first ego reflex is to blame Jamie. Yeah. But I never outwardly do it.
I totally feel it though.
Because I understand, right? Well, where did this thing go? And I'm kind of just asking a question, and she's sort of reading the subtext, which is, where did you put this thing? Where did you move it to? And inevitably, it's always me that has lost it or misplaced it.
But I often know where it is.
She does often know where it is. So again, it's not that this doesn't happen. And the reason that I think, if I can speak for you, that she can sort of tolerate that is because she knows that even if I'm sort of reflexively having that experience, she knows that I'm committed to owning my own stuff.
Yeah.
And I know that about her. And I know, and she knows that when I have a chance to sort of take a breath and get out of my sort of triggered ego complexes, I'm going to come right back to owning the fact that I lose stuff all the time. And I'm always misplacing things, and I can put my phone down and turn around, and 3 seconds later, I don't know where my phone is. And all of that is me. And so even if I sort of reflexively project that,
Yeah.
she doesn't take it personally,
Mm-hmm.
which is huge. And it's, again, each of us sort of having a commitment to always be able to see through the ego complexes and the being triggered and the projection, and just knowing that we're both doing that and are committed to doing that, it makes it much easier to step out of the kind of regularly. That's, to me, what a healthy relationship is truly being internally committed to that yourself, and a partner who is the same. And she has stuff that comes up that sort of seems obvious to me, and I could make commentary about it, but I can just step back from it, knowing whatever it is she needs to kind of know and own about this, she's going to do it.
Yep. I will.
Yeah.
The other thing about blame, and I learned this strategy from a friend of mine, Melinda Jacobs. So whenever something happens in the home that I feel triggered by and that I want to go into blame of someone for, Noah, because we live mostly alone. For example, I used to be triggered by like dishes not going in the dishwasher or just being left on the counter. And every time that would happen, I would create a whole story in my head about how he expected me to put his dishes away, or he just didn't care about the house, or some story that wasn't actually accurate. And so what I learned to do, instead of getting angry at him and saying, put the dishes in the dishwasher or whatever, I went to him and said, I have this story in my head that when you don't put the dishes in the dishwasher, that it means that you are expecting me to do the dishes all the time, or that you don't care about me, which is not accurate at all. Not even close to being accurate.
Yeah. And I remember that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the reality was, we have different timing
Mm-hmm.
and different sort of standards of cleanliness, and we've each had to sort of learn to adapt. But I think what you're saying is that you were committed to not taking it personally.
Well, I had to be honest with myself and explore, how am I making your action mean something about me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the story that's being created out of what you're doing or not doing?
Right.
Like, if I have a story, he's so stressed out and he's not taking care of himself. What am I making that mean about me or for me?
Mm-hmm.
And then communicating that.
Yeah. So that's probably a good lean in to talking about boundaries and expectations and all of that. Because if we haven't, if we don't know what boundaries are, if we don't know the difference between a boundary, a desire, and an expectation, and we haven't sort of done an internal inventory around that, then the next couple months could be really tough and challenging, because those things are all going to come into play, and healthy relationships need to have sort of well understood and well defined boundaries, desires, needs, and expectations. So do you want to?
Sure. Let me first, for you guys, define what these words mean in the context of this chat. So in a relationship, we are going to have needs. Needs are things that we need to have in place in the relationship in order for it to feel like a healthy, beautiful relationship. So for me, I need monogamy. That's a need of mine. And if that's not going to happen in my relationship, then that's a deal breaker for me. It doesn't mean that it needs to be a need for everyone. It's just a need for me. I have a desire for Noah and I to go on vacation 5 times a year.
Wow.
I'm like,
we're really falling short.
I know we are. That's a desire. So a desire is something that you'd like in the relationship, but it's not a deal breaker. If you don't get it, it doesn't mean the relationship should really end. An expectation is something that you want from the relationship that you have not spoken. So a classic one for me when I was first in this relationship with Noah was, I'm a really intuitive person, and I often can kind of tell what people want and need. And I believed that Noah should be able to predict what I needed, that he should be able to give me things that I want and need. Like he should know intuitively when I should be hugged and things like that. And that wasn't really a fair need for me towards him, because he can't read my mind.
Right.
I really wanted him to read my mind.
Yeah. Well, again, it's an expectation.
Yeah, it was unfair. It's unreasonable for me to expect that he be able to read my mind. That I have to learn how to communicate my actual needs to him verbally, not just throw them out there energetically or mentally and just pray that he gets my transmission.
Right. Right. So within this dynamic, expectations are not healthy in relationship. That doesn't mean you can't have standards. That doesn't mean you can't have boundaries and needs, but those are by definition different things, right? An expectation is a want or a need or a desire that is not communicated effectively,
and not necessarily reasonable,
and not reasonable, right? Like, I can't read minds. So for her to want or need me to read her mind, even if she's communicated that to me, I really want you to know exactly what I'm thinking when I'm thinking it. oops, that's an expectation that will never be met, and it's a setup for resentment.
And I think it's a common thing for women. Most women I know have a really secret longing, maybe secret, maybe not, for their husbands to know what they need. And why can't he tell that I want to be hugged right now? Why can't he tell that I need him to do the laundry? Why can't he tell whatever? People can't tell. You have to take ownership of what you want and need and speak it.
Yep.
And it's hard at first. It's not easy. It was really hard for me.
Yeah. And
to
so
do that.
when we've actually got a worksheet that we give our clients, and maybe we can actually, I'm sure there's a way to,
I think I can put it on
to share
I'll
it.
link it.
Yeah. We'll add a link to this. If you haven't done it, it's a great time to do it.
Yeah,
It's
you
a-
have all this time.
It's an introspective practice. You can do it. We don't recommend that partners sort of do it literally together at the same time, but that you sort of each take it, do it on your own, and then come back together and have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you aren't conscious of what each other's boundaries, needs, desires, and expectations are, then again, it's a huge setup to be triggering each other. And it's bound to happen when we are, thrust together. And you're grabbing something.
Yes, I am, because I thought maybe I could find. Yeah.
The most firm of these is boundaries,
Mhm.
right? And so a boundary is something that is a must have for you in the relationship, where it's clearly stated to your and in place, then I will have to take some sort of action. So, for most people, monogamy is a sort of an obvious example, right? Um, Although that may have not been communicated, which by definition means that it's an expectation.
Mhm.
Until you've actually communicated, um, I have a boundary of monogamy in our relationship. Okay. And if that boundary is not honored, here's how I will take care of myself. And it's up to each person to decide what that means. It might mean you go live in the basement. It might mean we have to go to therapy. It might
Mhm.
mean the relationship is instantly over. That's a personal thing that each person, um, is able to determine for themselves. But that the key feature of a boundary is that it's a thing that has to be there in place in the relationship. And it's also stated to your partner how you will respond if that boundary is not honored.
Right.
Okay. So
How will I take care of myself if the boundary is not honored?
right. So that's a boundary.
I'll give you guys a few examples from my personal diary. Dear diary.
This is fun. I haven't had a peek in here. So,
So here, when I did this was June of 2018. So I may have new needs and desires and boundaries now, because these things are flexible and change over time. So at that time, what I identified as needs and bottom lines, non-negotiables in a relationship were kindness, mutual respect, honest conversations, fidelity, patience, time and space to process and work things out for myself internally, that we make important decisions together, and that I can say no if I need to say no. Those are all there's more, but I won't tell you all of them because you don't need to know all of my non-negotiables. So those are my needs. These are the things that are, if I don't receive these in basically all relationships, not just my sexual relationship, it's important for me to have kindness and mutual respect in all of my relationships, my friendships, my family relationships, with my kids. This is a non-negotiable across the board for me. These are some desires. Desires, again, are things that I want to request that I receive in my relationship. And again, I'll communicate them. But if I don't receive them, then I'm more flexible.
They're not non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Right.
So again, this is for all relationships, not just for me and Noah. Active listening and eye contact when speaking with one another. That's something that's important to me. And I recognize it's not possible for all people. Some people have a real some people have a really hard time like actively listening, not being on their phone or distracted when you're having an important conversation. So I recognize that, and I have respect for that's not hard. That's not easy for some people. Another desire, that my privacy be respected. And again, I recognize that sometimes people goof up with that, and it's not a deal breaker for.
Okay. Well,
Hopefully, we're still recording.
hopefully we are.
Anyways,
The clock is
do you
ticking.
have
Well, so in any loving relationship, um, when Jamie has communicated these desires to me, again, communication is the key here.
Mhm.
If her diary is the only place where these desires have been, so is she, because how can I honor her desires if they haven't been effectively communicated? So she can read to me her list. We are still recording. Thank you, Kitty Cat 296. Great. So once she's communicated these desires to me, then I have the option, right, to figure out which of these desires can I authentically show up and help meet and engage with.
Mhm.
And she may have something on the desire list that is on my sort of boundary list, no go list,
Mhm.
right? And if that's the case, then we have a conversation and say, look, you desire this thing, which is sort of like the third tier down, right? It's boundaries at the top, and then needs, and then desires. So she says, I desire this thing. And I say, but that's a boundary violation for me. And so is it okay if in our relationship we honor that this is a boundary for me and
Mhm.
you're simply not going to have this particular desire fulfilled?
Yeah.
Right. And we have a conversation about that.
We have to negotiate.
Right.
Desires are negotiable.
Right.
The needs are non-negotiable. The boundaries are non-negotiable.
And so I can then, again, just not out of some sense of obligation, but just out of a sense of we're in a loving relationship. And I do, I know, like, I have a tendency to kind of like want to multitask, and I'll be sort of looking at my computer and scanning something, and she'll be talking, and it's a habit for me. And so I have to check in, and I know that this is a desire. It's a pretty easy thing for me to honor and respect,
Mhm.
recognize I'm doing it, and shut my computer or put my computer over here or put my phone down and make eye
Mhm.
contact with her when she's communicating to me. That's an easy thing for me to show up and do in the relationship, not because I feel obligated to do it. And it's not a deal breaker if I don't,
Right.
but I care about her and I love her. And so that's a pretty easy thing to show up and do. Kind of like putting the dishes in the dishwasher immediately. That's not my usual timing. I'm sort of at the end of the day, once everything has piled up, it all goes in. To me, that actually feels more efficient. I know,
Oh
shocking.
my God.
She's triggered.
I am.
but it's a pretty easy thing for
Mm.
me to capitulate to.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't cost me anything. It's pretty easy for me to honor that desire.
Mhm.
So we'll make this available. Oh, it's Julie. Hi, Kitty Cat 296. Julie.
And it's useful, honestly, if you're not in a primary relationship right now, it doesn't matter. This is a useful exercise for you to run through just for your own information. Like, what's important to you in friendship dynamics? What's important for you in work dynamics? These are go for all relationships.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you don't have a partner.
So maybe
Do it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can.
It'll certainly help you understand when you kind of begin to move into partnership. It'll help you avoid the kind of long-term abandonment of yourself that I think we've all experienced. We sort of look back on a relationship that lasted too long and go, what was I thinking? Why did I put up with that?
Right. Why didn't I speak up for myself?
Right. And so if you've done this work in advance and you know what your boundaries and needs are, it just makes life a lot easier. And so to sort of bring this back around, if you're suddenly spending 3 or 4 times as much time with your significant other as you're used to, it's going to be more important than ever for you guys to have established understanding of one another's boundaries,
And needs.
needs, and again, the expectation piece
Yeah.
is big, because if I have all sorts of things that I expect, which are, again, those are things that I need or want that I haven't communicated, then I'm just going to walk around being resentful all the time.
Mhm.
I have to ask for what I want, or at least communicate it.
Yeah. And people have different needs, like this time of the year and with everything that's going on. People have like alone time is a really strong need for a lot of people. When my kids are in Massachusetts where they live full time, we have the flexibility to take all the alone time that we want. He'll go off and go climbing, I go to yoga, or we just read on the couch in different rooms or whatever. We have the space to take the alone time that we need. But when the kids come, we both have to get more sensitive and more careful about, okay, what do each of us need for alone time, and how can we make that? How can we support the other in getting what they need?
Mhm.
It's especially important for Noah because he's just not, it
Social,
seems.
social.
No, you're just not used to having like
No,
loud kids in the house.
no,
You're just not used
yeah,
to it. I'm of course so happy that my kids are with me, but
yeah,
it's a really big change for both of us.
yep,
It's huge.
yep.
So
And
this is the same. It's the same thing for all of you guys at home. You don't have the freedom that you had before to get out of the house, to go to the gym, to take well, hopefully we're all walking still. But yeah.
and I had to redo my relationship boundary
Hmm.
assessment after the first summer that the kids were here,
Yep.
because I realized that that first summer that they were here, um, I hadn't defined what my boundaries were, and I didn't
Right.
understand what they were, and so I became really triggered and resentful and stressed out. And then by the time that they were here for the second, I realized at some point, I went, "Oh, I know why I'm so kind of triggered and stressed out all the time. It's because I have all of these boundaries that I haven't actually identified or communicated,
Yeah.
and they're just being violated left and right.
Yeah.
And that was my fault, right? I can't blame other people for boundaries that I didn't communicate. So I was walking around with these expectations of how I wanted things to sort of look and feel in the home, but hadn't communicated them. And really, actually, I wasn't even that in touch with them within myself. Um, and I had to show up, and we had that conversation. I said,
Yeah.
here's the things that have to be in place. These are non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Um,
And for me, before you communicated all that, I was so confused. I didn't know how to manage what I felt was the energy coming from you.
mhm.
I didn't know how to course correct.
So,
I want to talk more about expectations, because
okay.
I feel like expectations are a really big thing that people need to bring to their awareness.
Okay. Expectations
And
it
I
is.
and I think we have expectations of others, but we also have painful expectations of ourselves. And so when I did this exercise in 2018, my needs list was like 6 items. My desires was 7 or 8 items, and my expectations, I think it was like 2 pages. It was
Yeah.
a lot. There was a lot of expectations, and I really didn't know that about myself until I went through the process of understanding, what am I hoping for secretly in this relationship? What am I holding myself, like what kind of expectation am I holding myself up to in this relationship? So I'll read you a couple to give you. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say that, because as you go down this list, I think it's important for people to understand the expectations list is probably the most difficult for
Yeah.
because it requires a really sometimes painfully honest ability to self-assess.
Mhm.
This is sort of a shadow list, right?
Yeah.
This is a list of all of the sort of unpleasant, dark, um, deep stuff that we really don't want to admit to ourselves. So if you sit down and go to create an expectation list and think, "Oh, I can't think of anything. I don't know what my expectations are," then
You're not being really honest with yourself.
then that's a big red
There's
flag.
more.
That's a big red flag.
Yeah. Here are some good ideas. You may resonate with some of these.
There you go. Great. Perfect.
I had an expectation that others want to spend as much time with me as I do, want to spend with them. And yeah, that wasn't true. I wanted Noah to be able to read my mind. I wanted Noah to be in the driver's seat. Like I really was tired of being the driver in my own life. And I really would have liked you to have driven me around everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you felt that.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
but it was energetically in the relationship. I had an expectation of myself that I should be able to get over things quickly. That's not fair or reasonable. I had an expectation that my partner and I share in all interests. This is a big shadow one for me. I had an expectation that my partner would choose me over himself.
Mm.
I had an expectation of myself that I would be the caregiver for my partner, my friends, my loved ones, and not be cared for by others, essentially. That I was in a caregiver role all the time. I had an expectation that my partner and I think the same or be on the same page about all things or most things. I had an expectation that I wouldn't make mistakes. Isn't that silly?
Yes, it is.
I had an expectation that that others should be able to own it. They should always be able to own their part and see their part in things. Always, including myself, which I can't. I'm not perfect. There's many times that I can't see what I'm doing because it's unconscious. I had an expectation that other people will respect my boundaries without actually telling them what they were. I think that's a huge problem for people.
Yeah, that should be at the top of it. Like, we'll just tell you. We'll just give away the big secret. That should be at the top of your list.
Yeah.
The expectation that people abide by boundaries. That
those are just a few of them. There were more. There were a lot more.
So go back. What was
he wants to read my diary.
What was the second to last one?
An expectation that things that are obvious to me are obvious to others.
Right. And so you said, so you're getting into this is sort of a relationship truth. We're within ourselves. We always have our unconscious side, right? We just, there's no getting around that. In a kind of back and forth projective relationship, that becomes a source of stress and tension, right? I get frustrated that she can't see what I see in her, and she gets frustrated that I can't see what I can't see in me, and so now there's this angst and tension and difficult energy between us, for not being able to see our own unconscious self. Which, when you understand how the psyche works, it's literally impossible. It's like me getting mad at her because she can't see what her own face looks like without a mirror.
Yeah.
It's the physics of it don't work. It's impossible. I'll come back to that. And so in this is a huge opportunity for healing if we invert the way that we think about this phenomenon, right? So the fact that she, in a healthy relationship, right? The fact that Jamie has things about herself to which she is blind, but that seem obvious to me, it's because I'm standing over here and I can see them.
Yeah.
It's physics. She can't see them within herself. Instead of getting angry at her for not seeing and understanding these things about herself, I can find ways to sort of lovingly help communicate to her what it is that I'm seeing, and then trust that she's going to take that and meditate on it, ponder it, and do her own work, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I've got all kinds of stuff, of course, we all do, that I'm just deeply unconscious of. These things about the way that I am and the way my psyche works that I can't see because I'm standing in the middle of them, and I can't be over here looking in on them. But I have a partner who I know is willing to help reflect that back to me. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to explore what's unhealed in ourselves, and find ways to engage with that material in a loving way, which is, again, it's flipping this dynamic on its head, which is usually what's causing people so much stress. It's these people have so many arguments that come down to, why can't you see this thing that I see?
Right.
Well, because that person is standing in the middle of the thing,
Yeah.
and you have to be standing outside of the thing to actually be able to see it. And if you just understand that that's how relationship dynamics work, then suddenly what is a source of massive tension in a relationship becomes this beautiful opportunity to reflect back to one another what isn't healed. And so, now in this relationship, whatever's not healed in me, I'm going to project onto Jamie, be able to see it back.
Hmm.
And she's going to be able to show it back to me and communicate about what her experience of it is. And I can go, oh, that's what you mean by me being the way that I am, or doing this thing,
Hmm.
and vice versa. But it does take people being on the same page and understanding that that's what's going on. And so I can't have that experience of having my own sort of shadow weakness, unhealedness reflected back to me if I'm in the middle of blaming her for those things,
Yeah.
because I've projected them onto her. So again, that comes back to what we talked about at the beginning. I have to be willing to withdraw that projection and take ownership of whatever it is I think I'm seeing that's causing me stress and tension. It's actually a reflection of my own stuff.
Right. Being in a relationship and working with this stuff really takes a willingness to be vulnerable, a willingness to be wrong,
Hmm.
a willingness to feel shame and guilt if it should come up. Um, there's times when you've shared things with me that have felt really uncomfortable and hard to listen to. And maybe I've even cried about them, because usually, you can feel the truth through the resistance. You can feel the authenticity of what the other vulnerable, and take in the feedback, um, and work with it. It takes courage to live in a relationship like this.
It does. Yeah.
Mhm.
But it's also much nicer.
Yeah. The whole point of being in a relationship is so that I can see myself
Mhm.
and so that I can grow. If you're
Mhm.
not in relationships and you're not having your shadow side reflected back to you, your projection reflected back to you, you can't grow. So when I am watching Noah, and I find myself getting overly invested in what he's doing or what he's not doing, and watching him and analyzing him and trying to understand him, um, it's because my own shadow side is coming up. Something's really coming up for me to see and look at and heal. And it would behoove me to return that projection, to take the attention off of lovely Noah and put it on myself.
Yeah.
So I see Noah, I'm trying to make something up. I see him working out so much, and I see him like doing two. I'm kind of sort of talking about a real example here.
I know.
Working out twice a day, and that's kind of stressing me out, because I have, oh my God, he's working out too much, and like, is he going to get injured, and is he going to make himself sick, and so all of that stuff is not about him. He's doing what feels good to his body. Our dogs are coming to say hi. All of that stuff has nothing to do with him. These feelings that are arising about him working out and taking care of his body are about my own feelings about what I should be doing for my body, or shouldn't be doing for my body, and my own stuff about being in a body.
Mhm.
So if you find yourself looking at your partner, watching the dynamics in the relationship, and like being like overly focused on that person, most likely that's reflecting back to you your own patterns, your own beliefs, your own feelings that your soul is trying to get resolved.
Mhm.
So it's good to just see what you notice, see what you're fixated on, and think about, okay, this person is lying. I see this person lying constantly. That's really pissing me off that they keep lying. How am I lying? I'm probably lying somewhere in my life.
Maybe even just to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or right now, hoarding. I am not terrified and I'm not hoarding. If you are fixated on the fact that people are hoarding and the fact that people are terrified and taking all the toilet paper, what?
And that's why it's so upsetting.
Yep.
Yeah. So, doing this worksheet that we're going to get everybody connected with, the boundaries,
Mhm.
needs, desires, expectations, taking the time to do that self inventory, maybe
Yeah.
asking your partner to do the self inventory on his or her own time as well, and then coming together and actually communicating these things that maybe have all just been expectations. Maybe you've been together for 20 years
Mhm.
and you've never actually sat down and consciously said, here are the things that are non-negotiable in the relationship that I must have.
Mhm.
Here's the things I would like. Here's the been expecting things of you that I haven't fairly communicated to you or that are simply not realistic, and having a conversation and actually seeing where you land with this.
Right.
Yeah. So, Julie, that's probably a different conversation. Julie's asking, she says that she's fixated on why people aren't staying home,
Okay.
which isn't really about
Well, I think for a
relationships
lot of
per
people,
se.
it's a feeling of
Yep.
people are selfish. And correct me if I'm wrong, Julie. This idea that people are selfish and they don't care. So just notice if you're feeling or experiencing that people don't care about me, people don't care about my loved ones, people don't care about others. That's probably the inner story. You can ask yourself the question, why do people insist on going out? Well, you can ask yourself the question, when other people are going out, how am I making that mean something about me? What does that mean about me or
Yeah.
about my needs?
And so, and again, Jolie, not to make, this isn't just you, this is many people. Even the question itself, why do people insist on going out? That's a projection, because you're taking something and you're making it about these other people, and the statement itself sort of says, if just these people would stop doing this thing, then I would be okay.
Yeah.
And that's an inversion of the reality of um how all of it works, of how the entire universe works. So instead of saying, why do people insist on going out? Or why do people insist on hoarding? Instead of making it about the other people, we all really have an opportunity here to come home, come into our own home and say, how do I feel about this? The fact that I see all these people sort of going out and seeming to be careless or hoarding, what does that bring up within me? I feel angry. I feel frustrated. I feel afraid for myself. But actually asking the questions about what's living inside each and every one of our own selves, and not
Mhm.
making it about the people, because you're never going to figure that out.
Yeah.
There's
There's some
literally no answer.
millions of reasons for people going out.
Millions of reasons, and
All personal to
no
them.
reason.
Yeah.
And no reason, meaning that even that question itself, it can't be answered. You're
Mhm.
not going to find a satisfactory answer to that. The only thing we can do is withdraw that projection, stop making it about what the other people are doing or not doing, and say, how is it that my peace is being disrupted here? Am I afraid that I'm not going to have enough? Am I afraid that the universe is going to, implode, or that the earth is,
Yeah.
not going to be able to sustain itself through this? So
Yeah.
we have to make it about ourselves.
More peaceful each time you do it.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
so whether it's in our personal sort of romantic relationship or in our relationship, ourselves up for a lot of disappointment.
Yeah. It's painful.
Mhm.
It's easier if we can just come back to ourselves and feel our own feelings.
Yeah.
And then communicate them.
Yes. Okay. So there's only a couple people on, but
Does anyone have any
if there's a
questions?
specific question about relationship management,
Yeah,
we can always answer questions offline.
that too.
Okay.
Thank you guys for checking in.
Yes,
I know there's like 1,000 options.
there are.
Everyone's
which is
doing
good.
meditations. There's Netflix.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Lots of people looking to be of service right now.
Mhm.
And that's one of the obviously really cool things that's coming out of this. A lot of people are stepping up
Mhm.
and offering themselves to be of service. So, okay. If there's more questions, you know where to find us. We love you all.
Love you.
Have a good Sunday. You're welcome, B.